Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is April the 5th, 2024. It has been 3,721 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 45 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 42 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Thursday and Friday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There are only minor changes, so if you want to skip ahead, you won't hurt my feelings. I won't even know. 1. We maintain that Russia is setting conditions in 3 operational areas for future wider attacks, but we continue to question how much combat potential will be available to expand current operations. 2. Since the 22nd of March, Russia has violated Article 56 of the Geneva Conventions, intentional targeting of works and installations containing dangerous forces, 6 times, with only one incident acknowledged by the international community. In our assessment, the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is only promoting further aggression. 3. Russia's campaign to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure has had a significant economic and social impact and risks increasing world grain prices. 4. The disjointed response to Russian aggression by Ukraine's allies continues to embolden Moscow, leading to the most serious airspace violation of a NATO country since Russia expanded its war of aggression on February 24, 2022. We maintain that the inaction by the United States and the excessively risk-averse rules of engagement forced on the NATO alliance are creating an environment ripe for a serious international incident. 5. We maintain that United States military aid to Ukraine has ended through January 2025, unless there is an unexpected change in political leadership. 6. The continued attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine, and the situation is more serious than what the International Atomic Energy Agency is reporting. We start today's report in Kharkiv and Luhansk oblasts. The early morning drone strikes on Kharkiv knocked out power to 170,000, causing major blackouts. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, Rafael Grossi, reported that off-site power to the subcritical neutron source reactor at the Kharkiv Institute of Physics and Technology was lost. Quote, "As this facility has been shut down since the start of the armed conflict more than 2 years ago, we do not currently expect the situation to have any consequences for public safety. But it also underlines the potential risks to nuclear safety and nuclear security during the military conflict, and we will continue to monitor the situation at the facility." Unquote. The State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine reported that emergency diesel generators were circulating coolant and radiation levels were normal. On one of the drones that struck Kharkiv, a Russian soldier wrote, "For Crocus City Hall." Yeah, no comment here. In the Kremennaio of Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces launched more armored assaults in the direction of Terny and Yampolivka, suffered heavy losses before reaching the forwardmost line of friendly troops, and retreated. In the Siverskoye, Russian forces continued their attacks east and southeast of Bilohorivka with no change in the situation. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, GSAFU, reported that a Russian attack from the Verkhnyokamyanka oil refinery was repulsed. The morning report specified the fighting was in the Luhansk Oblast, which would suggest that there was an early advance by Ukrainian troops that was not recorded. We will continue to monitor the situation. Moving to the Donbas, starting in northeast Donetsk Oblast. In the Bakhmut AO, Ukrainian source Deep State reported continued heavy fighting in the area of Bogdanivka. Multiple sources reported that Ukrainian troops remained in Ivanivske, and after the failed Russian attacks from March the 31st to April the 2nd, the defensive lines stabilized. Pictures from a drone showed that months of fighting had turned the Bakhmut suburb into ruins. Russian forces attempted to advance on Chasiv Yar following the T-506 highway using 2 companies of armor. Of the 32 tanks and infantry fighting vehicles that were part of the attack, 19 were destroyed, with only 1 reaching the easternmost edge of the settlement. As the surviving units started to retreat, Su-25s with the VKS, Russian Aerospace Forces, fired at their own troops with rockets, collapsing any possibility of regrouping. We link to some videos showing the failed attack in our situation report. There is more information in the podcast description. On the southern side of Ivanivske, Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Stupochki were unsuccessful. The Russian 433rd Motorized Rifle Regiment, which was formed by consolidating the 21st, 506th and 589th separate motorized rifle regiments, was already sent into the AO, despite not being slated to enter the theater before May. One understaffed company reported on social media that of 80 members, 70 were already killed in action. Moving to assessment, Russian forces have consolidated their combat power to achieve the operational goal of capturing Chasiv Yar. Similar to Avdiivka, we believe that this will be accomplished regardless of losses. An approach along the T-506 highway will be problematic for Russian troops due to the higher terrain controlled by Ukraine to the north and the highlands just west of Chasiv Yar. Advancing west of Ivanivske on the T-504 highway is even less favorable due to significant change in elevation and the need to cross the Siversky Donetsk-Donbas Canal. If Russia captures Chasiv Yar, Ukraine's ability to hold the Klishchiivka plateau will be extremely problematic, and it will set conditions to advance on Konstantinivka. In the Klishchiivka AO, positional fighting continued in the areas of Klishchiivka and Andriivka with no change in the situation. For the south, the VKS conducted 4 airstrikes on New York, killing 2 civilians and wounding a 3rd. In southwest Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces continued their attacks in the Avdiivka AO with no new advances reported. Fighting continued in the eastern part of Berdichi, east of Semenivka, in the area of Orlivka, east of Umanske and west of Tonenke. On February the 24th, a man fighting for Russia with a New England accent planted the American flag in now-occupied Avdiivka. He has since been identified as Wilma Puello Mota, who fled the United States in January, 3 days before a court hearing for child molestation and weapons charges. Puello Mota was a town council member in Holyoke, Massachusetts, and a former member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. He was discharged in October 2022 after child pornography was found on his cell phone in 2020. After flying to Turkey on January the 7th, he transited to Georgia and then Moscow, joining the Petnashka Russian Federation Armed Forces with the 110th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade. If you ask me, Russia can keep him, and Scott Ritter, and French actor Gérard Depardieu. Russian mercenary blogger Wogonzo reported that fighting continued in the area of Vodane, becoming the 3rd source in 2 days to suggest that Ukrainian forces were able to push back into parts of the village. Ukrainian source Deep State confirmed that Ukrainian troops did push Russian troops back in the southwestern part of Pervomaiske, and we adjusted the war map to align with their change. Reinforcing the reports of a Ukrainian advance, the Russian Ministry of Defense, Armored, reported fighting was ongoing in the settlement. To the southwest, Russian troops had to withdraw to previously held defensive lines south and east of Nevelske. Heavy fighting continued in the Vuhledar AO. Geolocated video showed that Ukrainian forces retook the mineshaft complex south of Krasnohorivka, and a Russian armored assault was repulsed. Russian sources claimed that there was an incremental advance in the direction of Georgiivka, but without evidence. Fighting continued on the southwestern edge of Pobeda, with no change in the situation. Russian forces continued their assault in Novomykhailivka. Another company of Russian armor tried to advance from the south, suffered heavy losses, and retreated. Russian forces continued their subordinate attacks in the Staromlynivka AO, attempting to spread out Ukrainian resources. Attempts to advance on Orozhaina from the south failed. Russian forces are also trying to advance between Rivnopil and Staromayorsk in the direction of Velika Novosilka, where the high ground would enable them to complicate the Ukrainian defense. I said try, and I didn't say they advanced anywhere. In Zaporizhzhia, there was only positional fighting in the Orikhiv AO. Russian forces continued their assaults northwest of Verbove and south of Robotine, with no significant change in the situation. The IAEA provided an update on the status of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, ZNPP. Director General Grossi reported that on April 4th, the 330 kV external power line was severed, leaving the facility with a single 750 kV connection for the second time in less than a month. Grossi said, quote, "The cause of the latest outage was not immediately clear, but it followed reports of military activity in the region and beyond." Russian propagandists seized on the soft language, suggesting Ukraine had intentionally cut the line. Wait, I know the answer to this one. In other news, Russian forces have been relentlessly shelling the Nikopol rayon in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, directly across the Dnipro River from the NPP. Ukrenergo reported that on April 4th, Russia intentionally attacked the Nikopol solar power plant, which is attached to the 330 kV socket that connects to the NPP. Is the whole world afraid of making Putin mad? Wait, don't answer that. I don't think I'm gonna like the answer. But wait, there's more. The IAEA inspectors at the NPP reported hearing, quote, numerous rounds of outgoing artillery fire this morning, as well as on Wednesday when the firing of rockets was heard by the team. Russian occupiers blocked access to the cooling pond isolation gate, the roofs of reactors 1, 5 and 6, and the western part of turbine hall 6. IAEA inspectors continue to be blocked from inspecting turbine and maintenance halls 1 through 6 without interruption. The IAEA did not provide information about staffing levels or training, a comprehensive maintenance plan for 2024, or whether the radiation detection systems had been reconnected to the Internet. Reactor 4 remains in hot shutdown. Quick update about the situation in Moldova. Moldovan border police found debris from a Russian Shahed 136 one-way drone near the village of Etulia, approximately 500 meters from the border of Ukraine. Investigators were inspecting the crash site. Don't worry, Moldova isn't in NATO, so the alliance can say it protected every inch of its airspace. It was very busy on the Russian front. Armad claimed that 8 one-way drones were shot down over the city of Kursk without incident. Videos and pictures showed the claims were false, with large fires in at least 3 parts of the city, and a video showing a damaged drone crashing into the market area. A security camera video recorded the sound of a turbine-powered drone exploding, followed by a secondary blast and falling debris. In the Belgorod region, local residents were complaining that Chechen Rosgvardia was looting their homes in Kozinka and Gorkovsky, including stealing appliances and cars. Quote, "The entire Kozinka has already been taken out. The Russian Guard is a bully. People's cars have been stolen from us." Well, what can I say? Welcome to the club and enjoy great Russian culture. Up to 40 one-way drones attacked the Russian military airfield at Morozovsk in the Rostov region. Video shot from Zelensky Street. What a fun name for a Russian street, don't you think? about 2 kilometers from the airfield, showed at least one hit and likely 3 more. A second operational security ignoring video recorded on the military base showed at least one drone penetrated air defenses. The attack also damaged an electrical substation and knocked out power to parts of the area. Local residents reported up to 10 explosions in the area of the military airfield near Yeisk in the Krasnodar Krai region. Russian officials claimed that all drones were intercepted. Explosions were also reported near Engels II military airfield in Saratov. In St. Petersburg, Russia, partisans blew up an electrical substation, knocking out power to the Vsevolozhsk village of Toksovo and the Kalininsky district of the city. Local residents reported that there were rolling blackouts.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Here is my Theaterwide update. On April the 4th and the 5th, Ukrainian air defense shot down all 13 Shahed-136 one-way drones launched by Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that Ukrainian forces had stabilized their positions and that the supply of artillery rounds had improved. There is certainly plenty of evidence showing that the artillery situation has improved. Zelensky also signed Law 3621-9, which removes the category of fit for limited military service. Potential service members will now be classified as fit or unfit, and anyone who received the classification of limited suitability will need to have another physical within the next 8 months. While a series of laws have been signed in the last week paving the way to accelerate mobilization, the draft law is still under review, but should be submitted at the next meeting of the Verkhovna Rada. Colder weather increased electrical demand, forcing Ukraine to use rolling blackouts in the Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kirovograd, Poltava and Sumy regions. Ukraine revealed the new E-300 Enterprise one-way drone, which entered serial production. The drone was first used to strike the drone production facility in Tatarstan, and looks identical to a private airplane, minus the windows. Ukraine reported the new UAV has a range of up to 3,100 kilometers and a payload of 300 kilograms. The spokesperson of the UN Secretary-General, Stéphane Dujarric, told the United States state media agency Voice of America that he, quote, heard wrongly when asked about the Ukrainian drone strike on Tatarstan. Dujarric said, quote, if they asked me again, I would not answer like that. The official transcript from the April 2nd press conference does note that part of the conversation was inaudible, but the press secretary did not ask for it to be repeated. Department of Defense spokesperson Patrick Ryder told reporters that the United States does not provide any support to Ukraine for targeting or battle damage assessment. Quote, the assistance that we are providing to Ukraine is intended for them to defend their sovereign territory and to take back their sovereign territory. We do not provide any assistance for use outside of that. During the NATO 75th anniversary summit, Polish officials announced that it was decided to establish a NATO mission for Ukraine. Since I'm reading from a script and most of you aren't reading along with the sitrap, mission means office, not a military mission. The mission will enable better coordination between the alliance and Ukraine and aid in training and planning capabilities. The announcement caused pro-Russian politicians in the US to claim that NATO would drag the country into World War III. It's been a while since we've raised the question about the backyard bunker. No, there is no need to dig a backyard bunker. In our assessment, the only countries dragging Europe closer to a continental war from a regional one are the Russian Federation and its allies Belarus, Iran and North Korea. I haven't said this in a while. The best way to deal with a playground bully is to punch them in the nose. Every time we Ukrainians have punched Putin in the nose and crossed his imaginary red lines, he has backed down. Every time our allies tie our hands, Putin only sees weakness. In what appeared to be a coordinated release of talking points from Moscow, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said, quote, NATO countries, the alliance itself, is already involved in the conflict around Ukraine, and accused the alliance of being controlled by the United States as a, quote, destabilizing factor on the European continent. Moving to a blend of opinion and assessment. The comments from the Kremlin are bizarre, considering that the NATO alliance and Europe are preparing for a potential post-United States era due to government instability. The Minister of Defense of the United Kingdom, Grant Shapps, wrote that NATO countries not allocating 2% of their GDP to defense cannot continue. Quote, Russia threatens our neighbors. China is becoming increasingly aggressive. Iran is using its proxies to cause regional chaos from the Middle East to the Gulf of Yemen, and North Korea is constantly lashing out with its nuclear saber. Unquote. Shapps called for alliance members to dedicate the equivalent of 3% of GDP toward defense spending. The warnings coming from a growing list of European nations about the need to increase defense spending aren't happening because Washington ordered it. It's happening because Europe is unsure if Washington will continue to honor its security promises. The Foreign Minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock, said that her country would immediately initiate a search for additional Patriot systems, batteries and interceptors. Also speaking at the NATO anniversary celebration, the Foreign Minister for the United Kingdom, David Cameron, said that he told his counterparts to go, quote, immediately to the defense ministries and ask what else we can do in terms of air defense, what else we can do about weapons that are nearing their expiration date. These weapons should be handed over to Ukraine. Unquote. On the subject of encouraging Russian aggression, Axios reporter Stephen Newcomb reported that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has moved the goalposts on military aid to Ukraine and is telling lawmakers that a comprehensive border security bill needs to be passed first. Finally, Latvia announced a new military aid package for Ukraine that includes the first transfer of UAVs from the drone coalition and almost $11 million for the Czech Republic-led ammunition initiative. And now it's time for the update from the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and Mir. In the city of Yekaterinburg, Russian state media agency Year One reported that summons to the commissariat were handed to migrants as they waited in line for licenses and documentation. Because nothing says welcome new immigrants like putting a rifle in their hand. A video from a deceased Russian soldier's cell phone released by Russian sources captured orders being given to the commander of blocking troops. The incident happened about a month ago and involved the 60th Motorized Rifle Brigade from the Primorsky Krai region. The Russian soldier was in a trench in Zavitne Bazhanya, south of Staromayorsk. In the video, the commander of the 60th orders a field officer by the call sign Bucha to force his troops forward, telling him he knows what to do with any refuseniks. We link to the video with English subtitles and a transcript in our situation report. For $5 a month, you get access to so much more than the podcast, and you help pay our team. The Federal Security Service of Russia, FSB, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs arrested 17 people in the Chelyabinsk region for providing forged visas to over 1,000 undocumented immigrants. The group is accused of providing forged certificates of health and work visas. In our War Crimes and Human Rights section, we sometimes discuss atrocities, gender-based violence, torture and human suffering. Today's podcast does not contain graphic content. 44 nations signed the political declaration of the Ministerial Conference on Restoring Justice for Ukraine at The Hague during an April 3rd meeting. The declaration expresses support for the establishment of a special tribunal for war crimes and supporting initiatives to use frozen Russian assets for the benefit of Ukraine. The illegitimate Russian-controlled Supreme Court in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic sentenced another Azovstal defender to life in prison on false charges. Over 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered on May 21, 2022, as part of an International Committee of Red Cross and United Nations brokered deal. The ICRC has never visited or interacted with any of the Ukrainian troops since their surrender. Ukraine repatriated the remains of 121 service members from Russia. 107 were from the Donetsk areas of operation and 2 were from Zaporizhzhia. 11 more children were repatriated from occupied Kherson and Zaporizhzhia oblasts. 4 children from occupied Kherson Oblast, including a disabled 14-year-old girl and 3 boys between 12 to 15 years old, returned without parents or guardians. Another 7 returned with family members. It has been a long time since I have been able to end the War Crimes and Human Rights section with something a little happier. A young boy has become somewhat famous for running out of his home to wave at Ukrainian helicopter pilots as they fly over the farm he lives at from a nearby base. We've shared videos recorded by Ukrainian flight crews in the past, and last year he added a Ukrainian flag. In the most recent video, the boy got an unexpected surprise. One of the Ukrainian Mi-24 high-end attack helicopters landed, with one of the crew members running out to him with a package. The boy hugged him and took the package wrapped in brown paper while the other Mi-24 orbited. So shines a good deed in a weary world. That wasn't Willy Wonka, it was William Shakespeare. Russia has been forced to abandon the Arctic LNG-2 project due to Western sanctions blocking the transfer of 4 ICE-certified tankers built in South Korea and the withdrawal of foreign partners. Production had started in December but was suspended in February after US secondary sanctions were implemented. Sources in Russia are reporting that the Lukoil North oil refinery, which has been partially offline since January 4th, cannot be fully repaired. A required turbine gas compressor is only available from the United States, and Russia lacks the technical capability to build a replacement. The loss of the turbine has shut down the hydrocracker, cutting gasoline production by 40%. Reuters Thomson, citing numerous industry experts, estimates that 14% of Russian refining capacity has been knocked offline during the first 3 months of 2024. Quote, "If the stream of drones continues at this rate and Russian air defenses don't improve, Ukraine will be able to cut Russian refining runs quicker than Russian firms will be able to repair them," said Sergei Vakulenko, a Russian energy expert and non-resident fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. A NATO official estimated that 10 to 15% of Russian refining capacity was offline and that, quote, repairs could take a considerable time and involve considerable costs. Russian Minister of Energy Nikolai Shulginov told Russian state media that all repairs would be completed by June. Quote, "We are planning to bring a number of refineries out of repair in April-May, possibly by early June. All facilities that were damaged will be put back into operation." Moving to assessment. While it is highly likely that some refineries can be restored by June, earlier battle damage assessments at 4 refineries strongly suggested that the distillation towers would need full replacement, and Russia doesn't have that capability. 5 sources within Russia are reporting that the hydrocracker at the Nosy refinery is essentially irreparable, and that isn't even due to an attack. Russian industry does not have the capabilities to restore some of the damage, and the sources for the technology are limited to a handful of European countries and the United States. That is to say, it is impossible for full capacity to be restored by June. Adding to the growing problem, Gazprom's Astrakhan gas processing plant stopped operating on March 31st due to, quote, unscheduled repairs. Officials reported the plant would be repaired by April 7th. And that's what we know. I hope you have a good weekend, and please join me again on Monday. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.